What matters from your perspective, and for the perspective of the next hour and 15 minutes that we get to spend together, is that I spent over 20 plus years in management, in Fortune 500 companies, small companies, government organizations. And so you'll hear a lot of research, you'll hear about some of the studies throughout this today, but all of it's gone through the filter of my own experience. And would it work in a linen company with 125 employees? And would it work for a Fortune 500 company in Las Vegas? So all of it goes through that filter, and I like to just kind of throw that out there to start off with. I like to start off my presentations with a quote or a thought. And the one that comes to mind in regards to implementing change is one of my favorites, and it's from George Adair. And it's, everything you've ever wanted in your life is on the other side of fear. And I bring that up because implicit in that is that everything you want requires some sort of action. And in particular, it requires change. And that fear of change is real. I've got it. You've got it. Everybody in the ballroom next to us, they've got a fear of change. It's implicit in our humanity. There's a neuroscientist, Dean Burnett, and he published a book called Idiot Brain, which must have been the result of some sort of Twitter poll or something. But in it, he says that in an evolutionary sense, our brain is wired to dislike change. Change represents uncertainty, and uncertainty represents a threat. So everybody has this concern in regards to uncertainty. Now, as far as your career is concerned, this plays directly into that. Because if you want to be successful in your career, if you want to get that promotion, if you want to improve the operations, to improve anything requires change. So if you want to be successful in your career, it is imperative that you master change. And so we're going to talk through that today. I'm going to introduce a main concept, but the big thing is we are going to get very practical. So the first thing that I want you to do is I want you to put 3 changes in your head. Question, raise a hand. How many people jumped into this particular session because there is a huge change going on in your organization? System rollout, reorganization, something like that. That's good. That's good. Put that one down as your large change. But I also want you to think about problems that need to get fixed. I want you to think about improvements that need to be made. Those can be small or medium-sized changes. And I want you to have these things in your head so that as we go through this process, you can apply the principles and bring something back with you in the form of a plan tomorrow, Thursday, Friday, whenever it is that you get back into the office. Okay? When I talk to individual coaching clients or when I do workshops in organizations and change management comes up, and the specific questions come up in regards to, this isn't working. Almost the default answer, and your default answer, if you have a problem with change management right now, is communication. It's your default. If you want to improve your changes, you improve your communication because the communication cuts through that uncertainty. But I also want to introduce the concept of going beyond that. Absorb and engage. I want you to get information from your teams. And then I want you to engage them further. And the reason I say that is from the very first change management research that was done. Way back in the late 40s, maybe that's actually not too long ago as far as research in organizations is concerned, but they did not study change management particularly until basically that point. And it was a couple of professors, Koch and French, and they actually studied, Virginia, a very large clothing manufacturer. And they went into this organization and did a huge multi-year study in regards to change management. And they found a whole bunch of things. But one of the first things that they did is they took the particular departments and they were going through a restructuring of procedures. And they broke that department into 4 different groups. The first 2 groups were given what typically happens in organizations in regards to change. This is what we're doing. This is the plan. Anybody have any questions? And what they got was what this organization had seen many times before, that there was resistance to it, that there was antagonism between frontline people and management. There was turnover. And the results, were okay. They took a third group, and this will represent the absorb, and they explained the goal of the change. They went deeper into the plan of how the change was going to roll out. And they asked them, not for questions, what are your suggestions for making this change better? No turnover. No issues as far as antagonism or anything like that with management. And the change was successful, on time, and proved durable. The fourth group that they had was told what the goal of the change was and was brought in to come up with the plan, and then was a part of it rolling all the way out. The change happened quicker, the performance was way better than any of the other groups, and proved durable over time. So as we go through these things, as we go through the life cycle of change, and I'm going to go through some specific tactics, some specific pitfalls that leaders run into in regards to change, I want you to communicate, absorb, and engage in your mind. Because the more you are able to bring your team into a change, the easier it's going to be to manage that change, and the better the results are that you're going to get. So I mentioned the 4 life cycles that we're going to talk about, okay? 4 particular areas. Now, for each of those changes that you wrote down, the small change, the medium change, the large change, I'm going to challenge you to have a takeaway in each one of these areas. And you'll see what I mean. We'll talk through some of these tactics, okay? Because I want you to take it with you. I want you to apply it. All of the theories, all the research, all the statistics, that's all cute. But when I was in your chair, sitting at a conference, I needed something that I could take away. I don't want to walk out of the room going, oh, that was interesting. So, let's dive right in with, apparently I have to look at this one. There we go. What people don't spend enough time on. So, people are uncomfortable with change because there's a fear factor that goes into change. And so oftentimes, and most everybody here has experienced it, change can basically be like a 3-month-long slow pulling off of a Band-Aid. And the first mistake that leaders make, and those that are entrusted with seeing the change, is they dive right in. They look for the first opportunity to pull off the Band-Aid. And so we're going to go over a few things that you can do ahead of time to make the change easier for you and more apt to be successful. The first thing is what I call the change snowball. Now, I'll call it 50% of the people in here have a big, huge change. That's what you're looking at. And that's fine. It's great. However, everything that you do to improve your operation is a change. And it works the change muscle in yourself and the team. What I encourage you to do is look at those opportunities that you have for change and look to apply larger principles to them. Changing out the printer in the office is a change. And there's something that can be learned from it. There's something that can be referenced from it. Look back at the changes that have gone into place, the improvements, the problems that have been fixed, and look for places where there was success. Why was it successful? Have it in your back pocket so that when somebody comes up to you resisting change, you can reference all of the times that you were successful in smaller changes, and there's no reason you can't stack them up. Okay? Look for those points of reference where change has failed in the past, because that can be a very obvious one. I've gone through this myself in regards to a number of system rollouts. What did you learn from the last time? So that when it gets brought up, well, this is the 3rd time we've changed out the system. Well, yes. But we learned this from the first one, and we learned this from the next one. That builds confidence. The confidence that your team has in you is another way to break through that uncertainty in regards to change and make it easier for them to buy in and get over that threshold into other things. The second thing that I want to talk about is understanding the difficulty. We've all had those changes where we roll out the plan, and it turns out to be excruciatingly more difficult than we expected it to be. Maybe you've had the experience, I don't know that I ever have, of where I rolled out a change and it was way easier than I thought it was going to be. But it's important at the start to have some idea of the change's chances for success. Now, John Kotter is at the Harvard Business School, and he came up with this format. He looked at changes across a number of different organizations and over a large period of time. And what he found is that only 30% of the large changes were successful in meeting their objectives in the long term. And you will see that percentage over and over. 30%, 25%. I'm from Vegas. The odds are against so many of these things. But he was able to isolate 4 particular areas where the more that was required in each one of these, the more likely it was for there to be a failure. Duration is pretty self-explanatory. The longer the change rolls out, the more chances there are for something to go wrong. For you, that means that you want to try to tighten timeframes wherever you can. Get ahead of some things, and we'll talk about that in a second as well. But look to tighten the timeframes, because the longer something rolls out, the more people get tired. They get bored with it. They can slip into bad habits instead of carrying that momentum forward if there's a lag time. So look to cut that duration. Integrity, and I swear he was just trying to fit it into a dice thing there. Integrity really gets into skill. What are the skill sets that need to be improved, or how skillful is whatever the change rolls out? So if you're swapping out a system, is it an entirely new set of skills that they have to work with that system? That makes the change more likely to be a failure. Commitment, what sort of buy-in is going to be required? Is it a small thing or is it a large thing? And then the effort that is required, not just duration, but how much of people's time is it going to take to roll this change out? Do the analysis ahead of time. Again, these are the things that get passed over when you rip that Band-Aid off and just start diving in, which seems like the great idea, and in many cases it is, but doing some simple analysis ahead of time will give you an idea of what's in front of you and where you need to address things. If we're talking about a skill set, can you create cheat sheets? Can you create checklists? Can you create tools that sit on their monitor? Commitment and buy-in, you need to reinforce the why. You need to make it personally relevant to people. That's so important. If you want buy-in, what are they getting out of it? And you need to be honest. And then effort, hey, maybe it's that there's going to be more dressed down days. Maybe you're ordering pizza in. I don't know what it is. But make the effort tolerable, make some of those breaks. And you can bring your chances of success higher by recognizing these things ahead of time. And speaking of ahead of time, we'll talk about anticipation. Now, big data, analytics, all of that is hugely, in the news right now because it helps you see into the future. That's what big data is all about. I want to know how you are going to react to this particular ad on Facebook so that I know what the bid amount should be for the advertising budget. Okay? Anticipating these things, but you don't need big data. You don't need analytics. You have a good idea already of who on your team is going to be on board with the change. You know where some of the departmental roadblocks are going to be. You have a prior history, sure, but you also know what's going on in the organization. And you want to look, there we go. You want to look at these 4 areas in particular. Who is going to be most resistant to the change? Who's going to be your problem children? Who's all on board for the change? Who's your cheerleaders? Who has influence on your team? Who are the social butterflies that you need to win over? Anticipating and working with a little bit of intent can help these things through. And again, these are all things that happen ahead of time. The effect of past successes and failures. Have those things in your back pocket. Where were we successful? Where we weren't successful, what did we learn? So when people bring those things up, and we all know they're going to bring them up, then we have those to be able to reference. My favorite is the worst case scenario, because I've used this myself. You roll out a brand new system. What happens when the system crashes when you boot it up the first time? Because it's going to. So if you know, what am I going to do if that happens? Am I going to go manual? Am I going to go back to the old system? What does it take to go back to the old system? What is the timing on that so that you can tell people? What that does is that frees you to make that bold step forward and make that change. Because you're not worried about what happens when the worst thing happens. Okay, we're just going to go back to the way it was. Well, how's that going to happen? We're going to change this cord out, point it at this web address, and call it good. Whatever that happens to be. Now, in some cases, the worst case scenario may be really ugly. But at least if you make it a known instead of an unknown, you won't have nearly as much fear moving forward with your changes. The fourth thing is easy wins. When we talk in the second section in regards to going public, change is a very human thing. You can anticipate where the simple wins are going to be. Somebody is going to make their first sale. Somebody is going to make their first reservation. Something is going to happen. Be ready for those and be ready to build those up and celebrate them when they take place. Because then change looks like a success as it's rolling out, and there's a benefit for all of the pain that I'm going through relearning something. The fourth thing is just a reminder to act. Now, I say this because when I work with clients, a lot of them already know what their top priority thing is that they're going to work on. They know that important project. They know what improvement they're going to make. They know what problem they're going to fix, but they're still planning it. They haven't taken that action. My first job was as a lifeguard, and it was interesting. Everybody had the intention when they were climbing up to the top of the high dive of jumping off. You have that with some of your projects right now. You know that you're going to do it. But lo and behold, they get to the end of the board, and they just stand there. And they stand there. And they think about it. The people that didn't stand there were the ones that started walking 5 steps back with some intention. Slight confession in regards to the first concept of the snowball. It isn't just about your team. Getting yourself in the practice of making changes, small changes, helps you build momentum to be able to act boldly in regards to the bigger changes. Yeah. Battery with this thing. So, again, we're getting practical. Those 3 changes. I just want you to put down one thing that factors in to a small, a medium, or a large change. In regards to your small change, it may be that your takeaway is action. It may be that in your medium change, you want to gauge the effort. Or in your larger change, it's anticipating your people, your processes, where those easy wins are. Write those things down so that you can apply them to those particular changes when you get back. Or you can work on them in your hotel room tonight. Okay, moving on. The going public part. And I like talking about this slide right away. Too many times, again, it's almost like working with a kid in your Band-Aid. And you just kind of sneak up and pull it off. Okay? Don't sneak up on your people when you're talking change. Make it an announcement. Make it something bold, because what that does is that shows confidence. Again, we're cutting through that uncertainty. So, when you make the announcement that this is what's going to happen, when you talk through the plan, that's showing confidence, because that's a promise you're making. And so the going public part is something that you want to think about as a big event. Okay, maybe not IPO related, but maybe in regards to the change that you're talking about. When we talk through change, and when I say what are the problems with change, what gets talked about all of the time is employee resistance. Getting your team on board. And there is no reason that you can't have or change your enemies into allies. And we're going to talk through in this section doing exactly that. Because your team, the people that you work with in regards to the change, is your most valuable resource. That's what's going to determine whether it's successful or unsuccessful. So what is it that your people are looking for? Other than a clicker that works from a bigger range. As I mumbled to myself there. First question they need answered is, where are we headed and why? They want to know the plan and they want to know the goal. But beyond that, the question that gets left out all the time is, why do we need to do it now? Wouldn't it be better if we waited? Classic example. Answer that sense of urgency for them. Yes, paint the picture of the goal, what they're really looking for. Paint it crystal clear. Set their sights on what it's going to look like at the end. They're going to go through pain. Change isn't fun. So make sure that they know what the destination looks like. But like I say, get in touch with that sense of urgency. The second thing here, we'll see, it might just be a range thing. There we go. Is the WIFM. What's in it for me? Why should we go through this change? I'll probably bring it up again. I managed a very large reservation center. And it was long enough ago that that the system that we used to book reservations over the phone didn't integrate with the web. Showing a little bit of age there. So we rolled out a brand new system. So in reservations, we were told that the system is great, it's going to be better, you're going to like working with it, all of those things. Well, the system sucked for reservations. We had the old DOS-based system, everybody just, clicked away, whereas this new one was more web-based, you got drop-downs, all of that sort of thing. So it took longer, and you had to go through the change. It was terrible for reservations. But that wasn't the purpose, and that's what we weren't told. The purpose was to be able to integrate reservations onto the website. The purpose was the analytics that it was going to provide and make easier for us a decade and a half ago. That was the purpose. That's why it was a success. So I've got 350 reservation agents who all think the organization is stupid because this system sucks. No, it doesn't. What's in it for them? It was a healthier company. It was a company that could compete with your competitors in regards to reservations, in regards to online. It was going to be able to have better analytics to make better decisions. It was a healthy organization. You're taking one for the team. Now, if you had rolled out to the team, you're going to take it for the team, yeah, that's not a fun message, but it's an accurate one at least. So instead of a change being looked at as a complete flop, then it's looked at as something that's a success. The other thing is getting clear on how we're going to get there. All right? This is that absorb part. When we talk about communicate, absorb, and engage. How are we going to get there? Going into detail so that they have it. Fear of change is fear of the unknown. So getting in touch with the unknown and making as many unknowns known as possible is something that's going to get everybody past that resistance so that they can move forward and jump on board with the change. The other thing that you're looking for with your people, and what I encourage you to do, is get some change champions. Bring the people in. And it doesn't mean you're bringing the whole team in. You can pick 1, 2, 3 people. There's Harvard Medical School did a study that absolutely appalls me in regards to hand hygiene. Hugely important in hospitals. Spread of infection, that sort of thing. And so they did a whole bunch of studies trying to get doctors and nurses to exercise proper hand hygiene. Again, slightly scary. And they tried monetary incentives. And that got quick traction, but it wasn't durable traction. What they ended up going with was implementing peer pressure techniques. And it was peer pressure that got the more durable, lasting change in regards to that hand hygiene. Even in the case of doctors, even in the case of nurses, even in the cases where the why is very, very clear as to why you need to do this behavior, there can still be resistance, but you can utilize the peer pressure to do it. And that's why I say bring some change champions in. If you have a large team, I recommend these 3 people. I recommend your biggest resistor. Bring the person that's going to be the most negative for change into the process right away. You do that for a couple of reasons. A, it shows you're not scared of them, and everybody sees that. But also, they will bring up all of the negatives and all of the things that every other employee is concerned about. That's where you get to know them, and that's where you get to adjust to them. The second person you bring in is your superstar. That's the person that's looking for the best practices, who wants to be a part of that change. And the third person is your social butterfly, the person that runs the rumor mill. Use them to spread your message. If you create some buy-in, you're going to create peer pressure, you create some people that have a clear understanding of what's going on, and it's going to be okay for people to step into the changes that you're putting into place because they already see people that are buying into it. And especially if that person is the one that everybody knows is the negative Nelly of the group. So let's talk resistance. The first thing I want to say is a few myths in regards to resistance. Great leaders, change masters, don't eliminate resistance from people. They deal with it. All resistance doesn't mean that the people haven't bought into it. Somebody's got a problem with the change, that doesn't mean they haven't bought into the change. It just means that they have concerns. Not all resistance is bad. It can be very illuminating. That's why you bring in the negative person into your champion group, and that's what's going to help you ferret out some more information from it. Now, 4 areas of resistance, because everybody wants to know, okay, when an employee brings an issue, how do I deal with it? The first thing that you want to do is you want to diagnose the competing commitment. There is always some sort of status quo, shall we say, that is being weighed against the effort to make the change. And it can be security. It can be the effort that's required. All of those things. So find out what it is that they are most concerned about in regards to it. This is where you've got to dive in and get in with the employees and open that dialogue up so that you know what these things are so you can get past it. The second thing is, what is the assumption? The assumption may be, you know what, we've done this twice before and it failed every time. This is the 4th reorg we've done in 5 years. What is that assumption? And then you flip the assumption. Well, what if it was successful this time? Well, what if you had more job security? And then the question, do you break that cycle of thinking, and then it's, what's the plan? Well, how do we get there? Well, how would we improve it? That's where you bring them in and get the suggestions to modify the plan and create some ownership for them to get them past it. Big room. So I talked about reality, and I talked about my example in regards to swapping out a computer system. We didn't get the real story. We didn't put out the real story to the team as to why the change was taking place. The reality is, and when that happens in most organizations, you're so busy painting the picture of what it's going to look like when the change is done, you don't prepare people for the reality. It is going to get harder before it gets easier. People are going to make more mistakes than they make now as they learn new things. It's going to cost more money to start off with than it's going to, than down the road. But too many people set the bar too high as far as reality is concerned. The issue when you run into that is that you have a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of human beings, and they might be bought into it a little bit, but they have what I would call passive resistance. So they're concerned about what's going on. They may not be all the way bought in, but what happens? You haven't prepared them for reality. So they see that mistakes are increasing amongst themselves and the peers. They see that it's taking longer to do all of these transactions. And that reinforces that passive resistance. And then it becomes active resistance. Well, this isn't working. Well, this was a dumb idea. Now they have the reinforcement for their concerns before. And when they start talking about it with their peers and start getting more active, that's where you've just created failure. Too many changes should be successful, but for lack of transparency with the team, for lack of communication with the team, they are doomed to failure because of the natural effects of change and the natural results of switching things up and switching people's habits and the way that they do things. So, getting back, making practical, getting back into the real world here. Your 3 changes, small, medium, large. I'm making good time, so we will have time for questions here as well. What can you apply? What do you need to do as far as your teams are concerned to bring them into the process for a small change, medium change, large change? It may be from a large change perspective, you do need to get real with them. Maybe from a small change, you need to bring in one person. Or for a medium change, one person to help be a change champion and get a little bit of that peer pressure going. Pick one thing to associate with each one of those changes that you're looking at that you can start playing with come Thursday and Friday. The next step is keeping it going. Now, everybody's seen this poster before, right? So here's your interesting fun fact to take with you. This poster was a colossal failure. It was created in London in the 40s during the Blitz. Ministry of Propaganda. I'm sure that's not what it was called in England, but they had a whole bunch of these posters to go up. They printed over 1 million of these Keep Calm and Carry On posters. But the Blitz ended, and they sat in a warehouse, and they all got pulped to be made into something else down the road. It was only in some antique shop that somebody had a proof of this 25 some odd years ago or something like that. And that's when it became popular. It resurfaced. But anyways, huge failure on that. But talking about keeping it going. So the number one thing, Torben Rick is a researcher in change management, and the number one thing that gets posted as far as his surveys go as to why a change failed, 39% employee resistance. The second one, at 33%, is that the management behavior does not support the change. You not just buying into it, but you actively taking some steps to make sure that the change gets put into place. People see that. You're, for lack of a better term, you're being judged, rightly or wrongly. And people see that, and your behavior and the things that you do or don't do to support that change get noted and have a huge effect on whether it turns into a success or not. So the first thing, I may have to be forced to go behind the podium here. The first thing I want to talk about is making it fun. And bear with me for just 1 second here. The Queen's School of Business and Gallup did a poll in regards to stressed workers. So those workers that were identified as stressed versus not stressed. The stressed workers had a 60+% higher absentee rate, a 40+% error rate, and a 30+% increase in accidents than the not stressed workers. Change is stressful. Our brain thinks it's stressful. Doing anything that you can to make change, to de-stress the change environment will improve your chances of it being successful in the end. Now I want to talk 4 particular areas, all right? We talked about going public and making the announcement. Again, I want you to commit to the change. Don't shy away from it. Don't be afraid to talk about it. When we talk New Year's Eve, the celebration is usually before New Year's Eve. The clock strikes midnight than it is after. And everybody's just trying to recover. But try to throw out some sort of celebration. Again, this is showing, yes, it de-stresses the environment, but it also shows your commitment. Because you don't do something big like that unless you're willing to be held accountable to seeing it through to fruition. Second thing, over-invest in those early wins. Again, we've anticipated where those early wins can come into play. But talk about them ahead of time. Build them up, maybe more than they need to be built up. So that when the team hits those wins, you create that momentum and you're creating a positive association with the change. It isn't like it's going to turn into a boiler room when we go through a change. It's actually going to get easier. We get a party and we get whatever else that goes along with it. We get to ride skateboards through the office like the last slide. Third, extra support throughout, especially when we start talking about effort, when we start talking about duration. Your team is going to get tired. Look for ways to give them that extra support. It may be extra training, where you can identify some people that need help and you get on top of it ahead of time. What's the extra support? How are you supporting it? Because that will go a long way to seeing it through. And then celebrate afterwards. And the reason that you celebrate afterwards, the reason that you celebrate when you finish it, is again to create that positive association, but also to cement it as a success. Many people on your team may not know whether it was a success or not. They may have a differing view, a point on it. And that can be a huge issue as far as the next changes that you roll out. Here we go. The second part of keeping change going is to seek out questions. Your team will not be apt necessarily to come up with their frustrations. It's the concept of the meeting starts after the meeting is over. You get out of the update meeting on how the project's rolling out, and then all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of people getting together, chit-chatting about what's really going on with the meeting. Okay? People don't necessarily always tell you, so you need to seek it out. Hey, how's it going? That's going fine. You got to dive it a little further. Well, what's going well? Okay, be honest with me. What's not going well? What could be better? Ask them the questions. Engage with them. Because what that does gives you information to make better decisions down the road. And it also, when you take action on that information, it creates buy-in. You just created a little bit of an owner because something wasn't going right. You took it, you addressed it. Now that person knows, oh, okay, well, they're taking my suggestions. Great. Look for those opportunities. I keep drifting. I'm going to try to trap myself on the podium here. That's going to be difficult. We'll see how that works. The other thing that you want to address when you're engaging them with questions is you want to find what the effect is on their self-worth. One of the biggest reasons that people resist change is because of something that happens to their self-worth. They might see the change as something that makes them lesser in the organization. It may affect their compensation, their chances to move ahead. They are concerned about something personally, and you will not know about it until you start asking them those probing questions. Well, why don't you like it? Why isn't it working with you? What are your concerns? What do you think is going to happen to you and your peers when this is done? All of those things. Open it up, get transparent. Again, you're communicating with the team, absorbing what they're saying, and then engaging them with the answers so that you can reinforce that sense of self-worth. But you do that through questioning. That's how you find out about it. The other thing as far as keeping it going in change is getting in touch not with what is uncertain. Get in touch with what is certain. you know what? Everybody's still going to have a job. You're still going to get 40 hours a week. So the question would come up, running a phone center, as I did. Well, great, the web's going to take all of our jobs. No. Yes, the department will decrease, but our turnover is 10 and 15% a year. Call volume doesn't decrease that much. So people are worried that that's going to affect their jobs. Completely unfounded. And you can explain it if you ask those questions. But what also doesn't change, and what becomes even more important in those stressful environments, is the more human aspect of things. Being sure to recognize the extra effort that they put forth. All right? Showing them the respect. Questions. Show respect. If I'm interested in your opinion, you're clearly valuable enough to me where I would ask for it. Being trustworthy. Being transparent. If there's an ugly topic that needs to be addressed in regards to it, addressing it, because it comes out. You may think you can hide it, but everybody figures it all out. Letting everybody know that they're productive and that they still have those opportunities for growth. Change gives them another skill in their toolbox usually. You knew this system, now you know this system. You worked in this organization or in this part of the reorg, now you're getting exposed to this other area. That makes you more valuable. That makes you, a more attractive employee for promotion, and not that you'd mention that, but for other organizations as well, when you have a broader experience. But showing why the change is beneficial, but leaning on the aspects of it that don't change. So, keeping it going. And then I'm going to give you the best piece of advice I have in this entire presentation here in about 60 seconds. What aspects of this can you roll out to your small change, your medium change, and your big change? It may be that, you don't need to make the small change fun, but that is something that you need to prepare for in regards to the large change. Seeking out questions in regards to the medium change that you're going to roll out. How are you going to keep it going as you start this process? Because one thing about keeping it going is something known as Cantor's Law. And that is that everything can look like a failure in the middle. And so coming up with some techniques to show why it's not a failure, but to keep it going through so you get through that middle portion is hugely helpful. Last is finishing strong. Again, we started with people often jump into the change too quick and yank that Band-Aid. Well, you know what? After 3 months of slowly pulling that Band-Aid off, forget the last week. I'm just going to rip it right now. It takes 21 days to create a habit. Does your plan for the reorganization stretch past 21 days? Most plans don't. Here, we're going to do a week of debrief, lessons learned, and then, we're off to the races. You need to stick with it a little bit longer. Towers Watson is a consulting firm, and they did research in regards to a number of changes across 13 different countries, corporations in 13 different countries. And in their numbers, only 25% of the executives said that the change was positive and durable over time. So now we're back to that 1 in 4. Here's your quick way to double how successful your change is going to be. 55% of those same executives said that the change met the initial goals that it was set to. It was only afterwards that it dropped another 30%. Going from 1/4 of successful changes, accomplishing the objectives that are set out, versus over 1/2 of those changes. That's the power of finishing strong. Now, we talked about making that change sticky and looking longer term, stretching things out. But there's a few things that I want you to look at in regards to it beyond just stretching out your timeline. Yes, you have metrics that you're looking at perhaps for whatever that change is that you're rolling out. You're looking to save money, whatever it is. What do those metrics show as far as who's buying in, where it's successful? Where can you learn from where it's successful? Where can you learn and get more training for those who aren't up to speed? Getting more granular with some of your metrics so that you can make adjustments as you go along. Setting milestones beyond. Back to the getting real portion, you might be looking to increase conversion by 5%. Well, when are you hitting that 5%? You're not hitting it as soon as everybody's out of the training room. I guarantee that. But what are you looking for? 2%? And then a week later it's 3%, and a week later it's 4%? What are your milestones? What are you looking at? So that people have something to look forward to and they see the change progressing as a success. And the third thing is feedback. We come back to asking your team questions. What could have been done better? Where did we fall short in this? What worked? What didn't work? Engage in the long game of trying to make it a success. The other part about going back to the snowball is practice. And the easiest way to get practice with change is to take the change that you just rolled out, since it's fresh in everybody's mind, and try to find ways to improve it. Because that improvement is another change. Working from a continuous improvement mindset is one of the best ways to get a little bit more practice and work those change muscles that everybody has. Now, if you don't have a change that you're rolling out or nothing popped to your mind on this, one of the best places to look is your oldest procedures. The ones nobody has touched in years. Take another look at those. I'd be willing to bet if nobody's touched it in 10 years, there's a whole bunch of changes that could be made to improve it. Simple, easy wins. Everybody sees the benefit of it. Look for those opportunities to make continuous improvement something that's associated with those changes. It also, when we talk about improvement as change, it also breaks that cycle of changes just being negative. Reorganizations are the classic one. Great, I'm going to have a new job to learn and it's all going to be the same and I'm just going to have to change my job description again a year and a half from now. Little improvements and little changes can go a long way to breaking that cycle and diminishing that negativity. The other thing about finishing strong is what happens when change is a failure. And I really tried to find another slide that matched with the starting slide of one of the guys in lane 3 biffing it, but I couldn't. Cartoon is as good as I can get. Even in those best case scenarios, let's say you finish strong, and you're still looking at 55% of change successful, and another 45% that isn't durable over time. That's the nature of improvement. That's the nature of changing and figuring things out. All right. So what do you do? Because it's a reality. You're going to, at certain times in certain projects, not meet the objectives that you were looking for because you don't have a crystal ball that can see into the future for all the eventualities that are out there. When you come across failure, there's 3 things that I want you to focus on. First, is it a failure? What metric didn't get met? What were the objectives? That's why it's so important to get crystal clear on your objectives to start out with. What mattered? Where was it a failure? So in my world in reservations, coming back to that example, it was a complete failure for us, but it wasn't. It wasn't for the organization. We just didn't get the full story. So was it really a failure in the first place? Go back up to your boss and ask them if they consider it a failure. Then what exactly failed? That's when you find out that it is, do that deep dive. Where did it fall short? What objectives didn't it meet? And then you dive into the why. Reverse engineer the process. How could you have done it better? And this is another opportunity to bring your employees in who are on the front line seeing it. What could have been done better? What would have made this a success instead of a complete failure? Those are all things to look at when it is, and it will happen. You'll have things that don't meet their objectives, that are a failure. When that happens, go through these 3 steps to get the most out of it. I close this section with what is the job description for a leader, for a project manager, right? You are the first change champion. It's important in your role. The world is changing quick. You're not going to stop it. So you need to embrace it. Get in touch with being comfortable with ambiguity, with that uncertainty that's out there. Get in touch with seeking out information that isn't just readily thrown at you with a report, engaging the employees. Get in touch with de-stressing, how to de-stress yourself and the team. And get used to persevering through those tough times. Because you can put that plan together as far as change and as far as your project is concerned, but we all know those tend to kind of stretch out a little bit longer. So find ways to get in touch with those concepts. Practice them where you can, but that's your role in leadership, in project management. You are the change champion. You are the one that sets the tone. People look at you and they either gain confidence, which makes them more certain, or they don't get that confidence that makes them uncertain and more fearful of that change. So last thing, your 3 changes, small, medium, large. What concepts can you use in those particular areas? Write it down, take it with you. Thursday, Friday, you can hit the ground running on some of these things. You have improvements that are in the works right now. You have problems that are in the process of being fixed. Those are all changes. Take some of these concepts and figure out how to apply them for your benefit. In all of these things, the more that you are able to communicate with the people that are involved in that change, bring their feedback in, and get that engagement going, the easier that change is going to go. Use some of these concepts that we talked about, or if you had some other concepts that popped to mind, use those. But keep this in mind, because that little bit of thought can really help you out. And from that starting slide, if any of those people had taken 5 minutes to change into track gear and running shoes, I almost guarantee they're going to win that race. That little bit of prep can go a long way. All right, I'm opening it up for questions, and I think I see some there. Good.
Before we go to folks in the audience, have some questions. How do you rally the troops when you join an organization in the midst of change fatigue?
Sorry, say that last part again.
How do you rally the troops when you join an organization in the midst of change fatigue?
Change, what's that last word? Fatigue. Okay, thank you. Those of you that were in the time management talk that I gave just before this will recognize this. I recommend almost anybody who steps into a new role, into a new leadership role, utilize 5 questions. I used them for time management before, and they're great for that, but they are absolutely fantastic in relation to this. The 5 questions. What do you see going right in the organization right now? Keep it broad or make it specific. What do you see going wrong in the organization right now? Where are there opportunities we need to take advantage of? Where are there problems we need to fix? And how can I help you do your job better? Change fatigue is real. I get it. All of us are in some state of change fatigue right now. But when you talk about an entire team that's going through it, what I want you to do is use those questions to bring them in. When they see somebody new that just joined the organization, that takes some of that input and rolls with it, now it's like getting, a star quarterback on your team. You don't necessarily need to be the star quarterback to start out with. They will give you the answers to what needs to be done. And when they see those things being put in place, they see that improvement, and that can be huge as far as turning that morale around. That would be my number 1 recommendation. I'll throw out a second one, and that is making sure you're getting in touch with the why and the reasoning behind the change, and making sure that they understand it. Even if you disagree with the reasons for the change and the reasons for the continuing change, simply explaining that there was a method to the madness can go a long way into bridging that uncertainty. We needed to change this organization to keep up with the times. We're continuing to experiment and find ways through reorganization to run it better. Are we going to make it right every time? No, we're not. So we're going to reorg in another year and a half. Nobody said anything, but I guarantee it, because we're going to keep looking for those opportunities. Yeah, there's a little bit of spin to that, but making sure that they are in touch with the why, because a lot of people simply don't know. I'll throw out another statistic to you. It was Towers-Watson, if I'm not mistaken. And in that study, 68% of senior executives understood the reasoning for a change. It was somewhere about, I want to say 51% of middle managers understood the reasoning for the change. 40% of supervisors understood the reason for the change. What is it for frontline employees? 30%? 20%? 10%? So engage with the why. So those 5 questions are huge. If you step into a role with a new team, ask everybody those questions. It paints the picture of what your next steps. You don't need to worry about your two-month plan, because you will have more than enough information from that.
Any suggestions for approaching management that has been with the organization for 10 to 20 years who are resistant to change?
Well, keeping it real here, huh? Benefit and making it easy are 2 of the big things. They don't need to be with the organization for 10 or 20 years. You'll have plenty of bosses that are very interested in the status quo and very interested in retiring on the job that they're currently at while they sit there. Make it easy. So it may be that if you're proposing the change, you do more of a project plan. You walk through some of these steps. We're going to get this person involved. We're going to work through this feedback. Make it easy for them, because they are stuck in that status quo. That is the easiest place to be, is not doing anything. And talking the logic of, hey, the world's going to pass you by doesn't necessarily work. Make it easy for them. Find a way to insert yourself. Hey, if they need to go to a meeting, I can prep that stuff for you. Here's the whole proposal that you can present to the CFO. Yes, it's more work on your part, but I also consider that more work experience. And their apathy in that regard is your opportunity to step up and gain some experience that you wouldn't usually get. My 2 cents. And by the way, you guys can do any follow-ups that you want on this stuff. Something that didn't go right. We've got 15 minutes here, so we'll make some time once we get the offline ones. We'll form a line here if you want questions.
Answering the "what's in it for me" question. Do you have some good responses?
It changes a lot with the, obviously with the situation. My default is always to get completely transparent and real, because a lot of these, it very much has a negative spin. Those large changes, those reorganizations, the swapping out of systems, that sort of thing, those are big, hairy, and ugly. So getting transparent with people, yeah, it's going to be a lot of work. But I default to experience. That can be one thing. Hey, you may not want it, but this is going to be the experience that you can add to your resume. This is going to give you some exposure to different things that are going to improve you. That's kind of the spin that you put to it. There's kind of no easy answer to that one. But the default, I say, is transparency. Just get completely honest with them. We'll get you.
Okay. What happens when you hit the point where you have passive resistance? Is the project salvageable?
The answer is yes. I would defer again, and so much as my default answer is always communication. That's what's going to get you out of it. But then stepping up and looking to absorb. So you have the passive resistance. Who is passively resisting? Bring them in. Or if you know it's a team, bring them in individually, or bring them in as a group and just, stand in front of the firing squad. But whatever is going to give you the feedback so that you can take action on it, to either show why that resistance is invalid, or to show how you're dealing with it, or it might be something completely new that you do need to address. But you won't know about it until you bring those people in. Yes, at the passive resistance stage, the project is absolutely salvageable. But you're going to need some information, lest that keep going on that negative track. You need some information to be able to switch it around and flip it to the positive.
I was going to go back to your what's in it for me, just what's helped for me in doing that. It really gets back to the very beginning with what you talk about engaging. I make sure I've engaged the team and really getting into what they think should be improved, what they want to do in a process change, whatever. So when it does come back later, if there's resistance, I can keep coming back. Well, we discussed this, and this is what, this is what we're trying to get to, so they can then see that, yes, we're moving towards exactly, reminding them, what they'd said before.
Yeah. No. Such a key to get these things. When you set it up right from the start, it makes things easier down the road. You can get past that because now you can reference, well, we did do this. We are doing that. Okay, that didn't work. That idea that you bought into 2 months ago isn't working. Okay, what can we do to change it, given what we know now? Do we have more online, or?
We do.
Oh.
Anyone in the audience have a question?
Yeah, let's.
How do you counter the negative Nelly after the rollout?
I tackle them head on, but I tackle the people around them as well. So the negative Nelly may never, ever come around. All right? Newsflash for you, 10% of the people that you work with, either you don't like or they don't like you. And that's not going to change. It's personality differences. It's reality. So I tackle the negative Nelly head on. I hit them with the question that I like a lot is, well, what do you think we should do differently? How would you tackle that particular situation? Or how do you think we should tackle that particular situation? All right? You may get, well, I'd go back to the old way we do things. Well, that's not an option at this point. All right? You may not be able to switch them around by engaging with a little bit more. But what you can also do is you can make sure that the team around them knows the story. Why are we doing it? The thought process that went in. What the negative Nelly is resistant about. Make sure that the message is out that we are reorganizing, but we are not downsizing. That is not a part of the plan. So make sure that the team around them is aware of it. And again, I'll probably keep hitting that, but starting strong where everybody gets that message. Going out, going public with an announcement that lays out the plan, that lays out the reasoning, gets ahead of a lot of these things. Okay, we do have one in the middle. You can ask me a question while you walk.
Okay. How do you stop change that is doomed? How's that for a question?
That's a really good one. And that's not one that I usually get. It's a recognition of getting in touch with the goals of the change. So what is the purpose of this change? We're looking to save money. We're looking to save time. We're looking to make more money, whatever it is. Okay, given what we currently know and where it stands right now, how are we going to get there? Maybe you don't kill the change right now that's doomed. Maybe you take a look at it just from a reassessment point of view. And that reassessment, in this case, will lead to the obvious conclusion that it's doomed and that we need to stop it. But get in touch with what the purpose is, what the current plan sits at. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to be in a situation where the change right now is doomed. But if you pivoted it in some situation, it could be a success. I'm not interested in taking, sunk costs into account or anything like that. But if you can use the time that's been spent positively, then absolutely use it. But get in touch with your goals. Next question.
Yeah. Some of the change that I've had to implement previous in my career, at the end of it, was more than likely going to result in a downsizing. You need the team for that period of time, and then it's pretty transparent that people are going to be out of jobs. How do you deal with that? No, I can tell you how I dealt with it, but I'd like to get your opinion.
And this gets into that weird wiggle room where you want to be transparent. You want to be honest with the team. But, they come up and say, hey, why was Jerry fired? Well, I can't tell you why Jerry was fired. You wouldn't want me telling you why Jerry was fired. So you try to anticipate. So first of all, if you know it's going to be a downsizing, but there is a ton of work that needs to take place before it takes place, try to get out of the conversation of the downsizing discussion, first and foremost. Try to get creative with that. Because I really don't, I'm up here struggling. The easy answer would be no, you need to be transparent with them and you find ways to motivate them and stuff like that. And that's the easy, simple, and difficult. And it depends your relationship with the team, what they bring to the table, and how important that trustworthiness is. I want to find a cheat way out of it, quite frankly, because that's the reality, is you need them to work just as hard. And so this is the discovery. And it may be a situation where you plead semi-ignorance. We didn't know whether it was going to be successful. And so we don't want to freak everybody out about their jobs needlessly. But it was a success. Or it got these results. Don't use the term success right before you fire somebody. So you can play that card just a little bit. And just being real. I'd love to say be transparent. But and there's ways for you to do that. But it is a lot of work ahead of time. And it is a huge morale issue with that. What I will tell you is if you do choose to say we're going to go through this 3 months of effort and at the end of it, 25% of you are going to lose your jobs, you need to tell those 25% who they are right up front. Because what that does, it's not fun, but what that does is it gives the other 75% a free pass to relax and to continue doing their job. That's what you owe your team in those particular cases. Yeah. Tough question, good one. And I don't like my answer.
When implementing multiple changes, is it more effective to do it one thing at a time?
I'll say it depends, and it depends I'm not cheating on the answer, I'm just going at it from two different ways on it. I do not like rolling out a big change in stages. I like to bring it together. Because what happens is a lot of times you end up stretching out the change. It's the same thing with like bad news. If you've got bad news to give it all at once. But from a change perspective, I want everybody thinking about it one change together as a big thing that they can focus on. And you're able to leverage the successes and the lessons learned from prior stages of it, shall we say, to carry it forward and keep it going. Now, with that said, if you do have very disparate changes, ones that they're different than one another, I prefer to focus. Keep your focus, because that'll give you the best chance at success. There are a lot of changes. The reason that you get 25% of change initiatives are successful and 30% of change initiatives are successful is because a lot of these are just stabs. Somebody threw a dart at a board of 10 things to try to improve the operation and it landed on such and such. And logically it should make sense, but that eventuality doesn't always work out. But the way to give it its best chance at being successful is to focus. So I'd rather compartmentalize, and again, everybody in the time management one from before knows I'm not going to be a fan of multitasking.
I think we have one more question. Anyone? Time for one more question?
My favorite one to ask, who calls BS? On anything that was said. I'm not afraid of the hard question on it, the hard situation. You know what? None of that's going to work. Because I guarantee why it's not going to work in your organization or with you is probably why it's not going to work in 25 other people's workplaces. And I'd rather talk it through and see if there is a way for it to work.
21 days enough for a habit?
No. A lot of places say, there's 21 days, that's probably the most popular answer out there. Other research will sell you at 63 days. So if you want to split the difference between those and say 45, that's a nice, safe way to do it. But no. But if I start talking, 2 more months, people, they'll be running for the doors. Somebody had a comment in the back.
Yeah, just to add to the question that was a little bit earlier about the downsizing and what you say to a team. I was in finance and accounting outsourcing for 16 years and had way too much experience having to lay people off. And I think you go back to what your default answer was: transparency. When you have your facts together, I think you retain a lot more credibility and trust, and you'll be surprised how many people will stick with you and continue to work hard. But if they don't think you're being straight with them, you're going to lose them for sure.
Yep. It's a long-term game. All right. I will leave you all to the rest of your evening. I'll be up here. If you have any questions that you didn't want to ask publicly, I'll be up here for a little while.